So I think I need to start. Sebastian, you and I were chatting. One of the questions that I teased yesterday that was getting a lot of upvotes had to do with clearing the AMP cache. And so I'll repeat the question, make sure that one gets answered since I promised it would. So that question was, the AMP cache seems to be missing a convenient way to force a recache manually. It would be great for dissipating urgent content changes, better yet, code fixes.
So there's actually an easy way already there to do this. So it's called the cache update ping API or the cache update API. So it's basically there are two ways you can use it. The first one is simple. You call a specific URL, you pass the URL of the page that you want to have updated from the cache, and that's it. So there's the only thing, like there's a certain quota on this API, so I don't know the exact numbers, but like if you want to purge a large set of AMP pages, it's recommended to use the other API, so they're both documented on google.com. So the other one requires you to authenticate your API calls, and then the rate limiting is a lot higher.
Thank you. I hope that answered the question. And I also will remind the folks who are here in the room with us that we have a couple microphones set up. And again, we love to take live questions as well as the online questions that we've been receiving. So I'll go ahead and let's see, find another audience question. So this one has to do with testing. So what is the testing pipeline for AMP? Are there private or internal tests that are unavailable to the open source community? So obviously asking this one of the Googlers on stage.
Yeah, sure. So the testing pipeline for AMP HTML is basically we have unit tests for each component and integration tests for each component, and then integration and functional tests for AMP core. We also we have validator checks, lint, type check, and then visual tests. So right now, the only tests that are possibly not open to everyone are visual tests. You need to basically, we need to request them from Percy, which is the app that does them. If you're interested in accessing our visual tests, feel free to, there's a Google form that you can fill out and to add yourself to it.
Thanks, Kathy. We do have a couple of questions from the audience. We'll start here, and then we'll go to the next one.
I have a question in regards to SEO, and I was wondering with, I work with a lot of small local businesses, and their story or their whole idea can be told through, say, an AMP story. How does that minimal amount of content work with SEO? Like, will I be in trouble if the entire page is an AMP story?
Yeah, I think what it is important here is, yeah, you take into consideration what you want to deliver to the user, and then how you can take that and make it accessible to the search box. Because remember that showing something to the user and not showing that per page is considered to be cloaking, right? And is also penalized. So here's where you need to find a balance, how to format your content to make it beautiful, to make it accessible, to make it also attractive to your users, and then at the same time to make sure that that content lives on your pages in whatever alternative that you have nowadays. Because before, for example, if you had an independent mobile website or an AMP URL, right, you were not thinking about, I need to have this all displayed to the user or shown to the user. Now I need to. There are different ways that you can actually design and your content to make it happen. Like, for example, until now on desktop pages, showing your content hidden in divs, for example, to use a certain type of effects, like, for example, hide your content under a display more type of option, right? Not displaying your content by default to the user will make it that this content might not be necessarily taken into consideration all the time. Google has confirmed that with the mobile first index, that won't be the case because they understand that on mobile, this type of effects are needed. This type of functionality are needed in order to make it usable because of the limited space that exists on mobile devices. So it's about finding the right balance, confirming and validating that you're following the best practices to avoid clocking, for sure. But yes, I have to say that we have a little bit of more flexibility towards that on mobile in general, whether in your independent mobile URLs, in case you have that, and in AMP too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other audience questions? It looks like there's one.
My question is to Anand from Reddit. So the question is, like, Reddit is a very dynamic site. Like a thread within few seconds is going to be updated, like with new content. And AMP, how are you dealing with the caching? Because the content when the user is going to see land from AMP, it's going to be already a little out of the date compared to the actual one on the live site. So yeah.
So the question is, how does Reddit deal with really dynamic content, and how does caching work with that? That's a good question. So the way it works is like we use one behind cache. So at the worst case, you will see the stale content for like one of the requests, but the subsequent request you'll see the latest content. And so far, Reddit has all the post pages in AMP. We still haven't supported our listing pages, and that's one of the things we were discussing with some of the Google engineers here, like what is the best way to support dynamic content, and that's something we're going to look in the future for our listings page, specifically on the home page and the subreddit pages. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we have another audience question.
Hello. I would like to ask about the AMP access component. We are trying to build a paywall system. Is there a way to somehow secure the part of the article that has to be accessible only to the paying users? As I found the examples, the part is always included in the source code. Is there a way how to solve this?
I don't remember exactly what it's called, but in the so AMP access operates in a few different modes. One of those modes is just hiding content. You put a tag, an AMP access tag around it, and there's some expressions that you can use to define when it's hidden, when it's not. There's one other mode, which I believe it's called the server mode, where you can say, oh, after the user is able, after this expression is true, which means the user can access the content, then you can load the content from the server. So yeah, you can do that. You can define it like that if you want.
Okay, I was trying to find it all the day, and maybe it's just an issue of the documentation, so I will try to look harder.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can answer that better than I can, but I do remember at the time when I worked with this, I think that feature wasn't entirely available yet. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure as well.
Sorry, I'm actually not an expert in AMP access, but I'm sure we'll have colleagues to answer your question on Slack or, yeah.
Okay.
So actually, I can say a few words to this. So first thing you need to consider, like, it depends on whether you are serving your AMPs only to mobile users, for example, via the cache. In that case, it's actually not really a problem that users, at least theoretically, can access a content via the source code, but because no one on a mobile phone has this functionality normally available. So this is a problem that usually only affects users on desktop. So I wouldn't say that it's actually something that you really need if you implement a paywall with AMP that's only going to be surfaced on mobile. So having said that, so there is actually an implementation that the AMP cache team did that also supports basically it's called server-side AMP access, which is not gonna push. No, so in this case, it's not like the content will not be available in the source code. But to be honest, no one wanted to use it. It's just like everyone kept asking about it, but then when we said, like, we have it ready, someone wants to try it, no one wanted to. So, so it's actually, as I said before, it's not really a problem because AMPs surface mostly on mobile.
Well, there is a problem. I will try to explain. Well, we have the problem with our paywall that, well, it wasn't secured enough. And there is a community that focuses on stealing our content, and they just use every vector how to access it and put it really to the audience. So we are getting harmed by this. So this is why I need to find a way how not to open this content anyhow, even if it is really technical, because there is someone that gets around it. Thank you.
Next question.
Hi, I have an analytics question. Do you know if using the AMP client ID API, you can track cross-domain from an AMP page?
Yeah, there's some really cool, exciting stuff. If you look up cores on AMP project, we hadn't fleshed that out in our testing yet, which is why I didn't talk about it. But there's some really cool things that you can do with client ID API and cross-domain tracking. For instance, if you own multiple domains, let's say you own multiple publishing domains or things of that nature, you can, like you said, with Client ID API, track that user interaction across multiple domains, which unlocks some pretty cool tracking abilities and is really cool. And one thing I did forget to mention in my presentation, which I'll mention now, is wherever country you are developing your tracking capabilities, then be sure to check your local laws, because especially over here in Europe, there's some stuff you need to specify. But yeah, you can, with the Client ID API, track across domain. We just haven't got to it yet in our testing.
Thank you.
And it's great. Good question.
You know, Chris, while you have the mic in your hand, here's another analytics-related question. Is it possible to get geolocation data passed through to the AMP analytics object?
I don't know the answer to that question. I assume so.
Can we fall back to one of our Googlers?
So as far as I know, I'm not an AMP analytics expert, but I don't think that currently there is a direct way you can pass geolocation data via analytics. So that's not possible. I mean, theoretically, what you can do is basically get at least a roughly idea about the location just by analyzing the IP, which is triggering the analytics request. But that's something that you would have to implement on your own, and that you won't be able to pass through.
And I will say also that any sort of tracking ability that we weren't unable to do, if you get that conversation started with the AMP community and on Git, generally we can get those features pushed through if it's pressing importance. And geolocation seems like it would be something that would be a focus for the AMP team.
Great. Okay, well, we give the audience a chance to step up to the microphones. I'll ask another question that we got online. This one is about the AMP validator. It seems like the AMP project validator is less strict than the Google AMP validator, which often leads to Search Console errors. Will there be a universal version?
Actually, the Google validator is basically pulled from the AMP project validator at an interval of maybe once every 2 weeks. So it is off a little bit, but it's actually the same validator. It's just maybe behind by 2 weeks.
Good. Thank you for clearing that up. Next one, this actually is a question for me. So I'm going to represent from me. I'm going to represent, say, a stakeholder who is lightly technical, not a developer, but maybe a decision maker, like a product decision maker, a strategic decision maker, really cares about the AMP roadmap, not going to contribute code, but I would like to understand where it is and be able to influence it. I'll ask the Googlers, but really anyone on the panel, what are the resources and tools that you might recommend to me or the developer might recommend to one of their internal stakeholders who, again, isn't as technical but wants to really be involved and have a voice in the AMP project? Anyone?
Are you talking
Go
about?
for it.
Are you talking about trying to convince stakeholders that they should adopt AMP even though they're not technical? Or are you talking about tools that maybe someone that is not technical can use
I think
to influence AMP?
More the latter. More the latter. Tools and resources.
Analytics. I guess that's my answer for everything. As an agency, we're a relatively small agency, and we're very traditional. Our digital arm is growing, and so we have a lot of non-technical people that have stake in AMP and how it's being used. And that does sound stereotypical, but generally what we found has been most helpful for them is preparing some sort of standard reports that give them an overhead view of how AMP is performing, and then they can influence how it works. And that greatly helps our creatives in particular. Our creatives are the ones actually designing the page and actually choosing the people who go on there and taking the pictures, and giving them the data points to kind of tell them this campaign is working and this campaign isn't, does give them the ability as a non-technical person to influence the design of AMP and our implementation. So I guess my answer is analytics, which is stereotypical, but
Yeah.
analytics.
No, makes sense.
Yes, well, depending on the stage of the project, right? Like, for example, right at the beginning when there's still this process of decision maker, if they should go for it or not, I have found in the past that is meaningful to show, for example, the percentage of the SERPs, of the search results on mobile that have AMP already. Mm-hmm. There is nothing worse for a company, or especially a decision maker, to be shown how their competitors are already doing or profiting from something that they haven't yet, right? So showing the percentage of results that are already shown in AMP in their industry specifically serves a lot. So for example, the sensor report from SEMrush, they are tracking this, and also Ranger, they are tracking this per industry and country. So you can see that, for example, in certain industry, like media type of news site, is 20-something% of results are already shown in AMP, and you can see this per country and different industries too. And then, of course, after the implementation has been done, what I usually do during the ongoing monitoring process is to set a dashboard. So they might not necessarily want to see the indexing, the percentage of pages that are indexed on AMP, because they don't really care. But they can see, for example, the share of visits that are coming through AMP URLs versus not AMP, the typical behavior that the user have, and the conversions at the end of the day, whatever it is a conversion for your company or not, and to better understand if at some point there is a mismatch, why is this happening, if it is reasonable to compare apples to apples, if you provide already all the functionalities of your site through the AMP URLs, and if there's something missing, something else that can be provided through AMP, and like this, prioritize the allocation of resources on developing more on AMP if you see the potential already coming, for sure. So yes.
I think there are, I guess, two parts of this question. For understanding what we're working on at a very high level, I think AMP Conf and AMP Conf and our roadshows are a great way to do that. We try to communicate that. And on a very concrete levels, on GitHub, we do provide like bi-weekly status updates on what everyone on the team is working on. So that's about understanding what we're working on. And for influencing the direction of AMP at a higher level, well, there's always coming and talking to us here at AmpConf at our booth and roadshows. There's also design reviews, which are really like, you can basically talk about any issue or challenges or concerns you have with AMP. And there's also Slack, and for something more detailed, GitHub issues. So lots of different channels. It depends on what stage and what scope of a problem or issue that you're looking at.
That's good.
Just one addition to this, and one thing I always recommend here is when someone is interested in a feature that's already being discussed on GitHub, then don't simply go away and say, okay, no, this is already handled, but join in on the conversation, add your voice, and the more people are asking for something for a new feature, the more likely it is that it's going to be prioritized earlier. So that's definitely something I would recommend to do.
Yeah, that's good advice. That just because you may not be a developer, that doesn't mean you need to be scared from paying attention to what's happening in GitHub and on the roadmap and on Slack. Good. Oh, you have something else to add?
I have a question.
Yeah, uh-oh.
For
Why are
you?
you looking at me?
Yeah. So I think I probably represent some people there that are eagerly looking for people who love AMP, who developers who want to do AMP. Is there any sort of resource or something that I can pull from that says, like, I'm hiring AMP developers, I went to AMP Conf, I want to do it, but I have no idea how to do it, and I want to hire someone to help me do it? Is there any sort of resource that we can go to, maybe in the Slack community or something like that, or the Git community, to find someone like that?
That's a good question. So in other words, sort of find developers who are who are already passionate about AMP or have already worked with AMP and are interested in.
Yeah, because I find that, I mean, everyone, when we start programming something for the first time, we all make mistakes, right? And I would rather launch this new thing with someone who's experienced, and I'm having a hard time in small Chattanooga, Tennessee, finding those people, as are probably some other people here in this room. And so I just, where can I go to find people that are jazzed up about AMP, who have done it before, and is there any sort of resource I can pull from that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I saw some heads nodding as well.
Is it everyone in this room? Because you can come talk to me afterwards.
So I think that's a good question, and again, I think this is the right room to ask that question to, in terms of the audience and also the Googlers who are here. I saw you picked up a mic, Sebastian.
Yeah, I just want to say, so I'm sorry, but there's no list that you can take a look at. But I mean, again, my recommendation would be just to take a look at who's very active in the community, who's like very active on Slack, who's very active on Stack Overflow and GitHub, and I think this is, or on conferences. So I think this is a really good way to identify who's really passionate about working with AMP.
And I guess that further inspires all of us to go contribute on AMP anyway, because that's where I'll be looking to hire you from.
Yeah, for
in
sure.
In that case.
For sure. Okay, we're going to go back into a more technical question, and don't put down that mic. The question is, there are actually two questions from the same person, but very similar. What about the thumbnail and full image source in Lightbox component, and then what about thumbnail and full image source in carousel component?
Okay, so I think this refers to the Lightbox gallery component we demonstrated earlier today. So the way it works is, so you annotate an existing image or carousel with the Lightbox attribute, which will then open the image like in a full screen Lightbox. And like if the image is a really, really small icon or thumbnail, in that case you might see like a really low resolution full screen image, which is a bad user experience. But there are definitely ways that we plan to work around. Actually, okay, you should answer that question.
So you can specify a source set attribute applicable for different widths, device widths. Yeah, and there's a thumbnail attribute that you can specify for the gallery view, where it shows like a bunch of different thumbnails. But if your image is a thumbnail itself, yeah, I think the source set attribute should handle that, though it's not implemented yet. So it's on the schedule. Sorry.
Thank you. And I think we have another audience question.
Yeah. The client ID API was really interesting to me, not only because of analytics possibilities, but because of maybe like personalization possibilities. Is there any push to kind of, the only way I could think of doing this is like putting the client ID in a URL that you're making an API call to in like an AMP list or something? Is that something that you guys are looking into making available?
I don't know so much. I don't know if AMP list does this, but AMP Access does, for instance. So yeah, one of the things that you do on AMP Access when you open one of those login URLs, there's this URL expansion. So there's a few different variables that you can put there, and they get filled in with some data. And one of those is the client ID. So that's like how we track users that come from AMP pages, and then we map them to the same users that come from regular pages that use our other more regular client-side integration. I don't know if AMP list also does this on their. Okay.
AMP list supports it.
Oh, okay. So the person wouldn't have to log in. You could just use their client ID in that.
So
oh, that's perfect. Oh, okay. Great.
It even works with normal URLs, like normal anchor links.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. We've got a few more minutes, so we'll see if there are any last audience questions. And meanwhile, I've got a couple more to go. So Thiago, since you can give us a sense of the time and level of effort involved, since you were sort of taking the AMP access component, sort of vendorizing it, as you said, give us a sense of what kind of effort that was.
I don't know if our case is such a good example, because like I said, a lot of the processes that I see in place nowadays weren't entirely there at the time. So maybe we spent some more time talking to one of the product managers and then one of the lead developers than someone today would have to. I feel like the processes today are a lot more streamlined. Also, we were doing this while we were doing other things, so I don't think we have a good example for that. I think it took us like a couple of months in general, but it was, yeah, it was a bit of a slower process for us for those reasons. I feel like nowadays it's probably, especially with like the weekly design reviews and the intent to implement issues and just more eyes to look at these issues and answer, I think it might be a lot faster to actually get anything going and to get any idea being discussed and figuring out what the best way to go is.
Yeah, it's all accelerating, right?
Yeah.
Good. And Chris, for you, having implemented AMP for landing pages, and you did a great job of describing the environment in which your users are accessing that content and why AMP is so valuable. What kind of conversations have you had with your clients about it? Do they notice? Do they even know it's AMP? And does that matter in the conversation, or is it just a faster page?
Actually, this has been one of the really huge benefits of using AMP at an agency like mine and dealing with clients is that I can say that it's an open source project that has a lot of Google engineers working on it, and it sounds really good. And so I can go to these clients and I can say, yeah, we're using AMP, and look at that right next to a Google logo, and they, oh, because we use Google for everything else. And so, yeah, it's been really beneficial. They do know it's AMP. And the conversation that I have with my clients they are very pleased, because I think Vamsi said it earlier today, revenue speaks more than anything, and the revenue has gone up considerably. So they do know it's AMP. They're very excited that it's AMP. We're actually investigating, right now we do it all through our landing page deployment system, but we're investigating deploying whole sites. We have a hospital site we're thinking about, and a couple other full-fledged sites going completely AMP by the client's request, because they know it's so good. So.
Awesome. Good. Any other audience questions? Nope, I think we're pretty good. Is there anything else anyone on the panel would like to add to the conversation? Good? Everyone's excited for the AMP leadership panel? All right. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for your presentations and your work.